Good evening. I'm Amy Gross, the Executive Director of Save Venice. Thank you for joining us tonight, and thank you to all the members whose generous support makes our restoration work in Venice possible. I'm very grateful to Cynthia Zarin, who graciously is spending some of her evening tonight with us. Cynthia's latest book, just released this summer, Two Cities, published by David Werner, which is beautiful, is an enchanting and transporting read, and especially during these days when we cannot travel as we would like. Tonight, Cynthia will read from her book for about 15 minutes, and then she and I will have a dialogue for about 10 minutes, after which time there will be a moment for questions from the audience. So I invite you to submit your questions throughout the evening using the chat or Q&A feature. Cynthia Zarin is the author of 5 books of poetry, most recently The Ada Poems, 2010, and Orbit, 2017, as well as 5 books for children and a collection of essays, An Enlarged Heart, A Personal History, 2013. Her most recent book is Two Cities, Essays on Venice and Rome, 2020. Her honors and awards include a John Simon Guggenheim Memorial Award, a National Endowment for the Arts Award in Literature, the Peter B. Levin Award, an Ingram Merrill Award for Poetry, the Los Angeles Times Book Award for Poetry for the Watercourse, a Roger P. Lippencourt Award for Consumer Reporting, the New York Women's Press Award for Writing on the Arts, the Georgia Book Award for Writing for Children, and a Parents' Choice Award for Children's Literature. A longtime contributor to The New Yorker, for which she currently writes regularly on books and the theater, as well as the New York Times and other publications. She is also a former contributing editor for Gourmet magazine. She often works with choreographers and composers. Collaborations include ballets based on her poems, The Impulse Wants Company, and Deer and Blackbirds for the New York-based company Ballet Collective. And her poems have been set to music by the composers Ellis Ludwig Leon, Ted Rosenthal, and the Roman jazz trumpeter and jazz composer Massimo Nunzi, among others. And without further ado, I welcome Cynthia and I invite her to read from her book, which is sure to take us elsewhere from this virtual screen and moment we're in. So thank you, Cynthia.
Well, thank you, Amy, for that lovely introduction, and I'm honored to be here to speak to all of you at Save Venice, and an organization that I've always admired. And I think really Save Venice is, of course, about saving the wonderful city of Venice, but I think we all know that saving Venice is also a metaphor for saving beauty where we can find it, without which we really cannot be who we want to be. So I really, all of us, Italophiles, very much appreciate your efforts and applaud them. It's not just about the Acqua Alta. I'm going to read from, of course, my book has 2 long essays, one about Venice and one about Rome, and I'm going to read from the first one, which is about Venice. I'm not reading straight through exactly. I've sort of cobbled something together that I think perhaps will be of interest. And without further ado, I'll give it a go. Thank you for listening. The best way to approach Venice from the airport is to take the water taxi. It is also the most expensive. Like most things in Venice, there are convolutions before the payoff. There is no transport between the airport proper and the boat deck where the water taxis come in. You pull or carry your luggage down a long pathway, a distance of perhaps a quarter of a mile, following signs put up to encourage the traveler. This is the last direct route in Venice, the last walk on which not to get lost. At the dock, Manolo, the director of water traffic, talks endlessly into his cell phone, gesticulating about what seems to be nothing at all. He is a handsome man, taller than most Venetians, and indeed he is not from Venice, but from Naples. The company's logo is a winged gold lion, the symbol of Venice's patron saint, the Apostle Mark, who appeared to the prophet Ezekiel as a lion with wings. The lion is often depicted over water to show dominance over the seas. The story of the winged lion is a fairy tale of guilt and chicanery. In the 9th century, 3 avid Venetians removed the body of St. Mark from his tomb in Alexandria. To hide the body, they put it in a basket and covered it with herbs and pork flesh, which Muslims would not touch. As they set sail for Venice, a great storm blew up and St. Mark appeared to the captain, who sailed the boat to safety. The Venetians carved a likeness of the winged lion on their doorways and kept lions as pets. One was kept in a gilded cage in the piazza until it died, poisoned by the gilt paint it licked off the bars. A Venetian story. Lions were then forbidden in the city precinct for 100 years. After a long wait, water taxis arrive and passengers board the boats in no discernible order. My suitcase is handed over. The lagoon straightens itself out briefly to a funnel as it passes San Michele, the island of the dead. The boatman knows everyone on the waterway. He raises his hand in greeting to each boat as we pass. He is solicitous. If it is too windy, I can go in the cabin. It is windy, but I have wound a scarf around my head. He nods, satisfied. We pass through the fog, and then, all at once, it is there, the Grand Canal, beautiful and absurd. Can there really be gondolas? There are. A little boy waves from the window of a vaporetto, a boy who looks exactly like the son who belongs to Bronzino, who I left looking in the mirror, who I've left behind. He keeps waving madly all the way until the taxi turns into the landing of the hotel on the Rio di San Travaso, right before the Ponte Accademia. For a moment, it is all light and water. At the hotel, the hanging geraniums are violet, red, and pink. There is a little step down to the concierge desk, but despite the warning sign, I trip. Everyone trips. The pensione is like the water taxi, like Venice, beautiful and impossible. In the garden, bougainvillea hangs over a glider. A waiter brings you delicious snacks with your evening drink. And at breakfast, there is melon the color of sunset. But you must log on with a different password every day to use the internet. Postage is noted carefully in a book. And the windows in your room, though you have asked to have them left open, are shut up tight against the air from the lagoon, which the chambermaid says is not healthy for sleep. Signora, it will give you nightmares, incubi. She makes a strangling gesture with her hands and rolls her blue eyes like a horror movie starlet. You have been here before, yes? Guido at the desk asks, but with your husband, a man with silver hair. Venice is a city of the unconscious. Joseph Brodsky, who is buried on San Michele, wrote, I felt as if I'd stepped into my own self-portrait in the cold hair. In maps of the brain, the central cortex is shaped like Venice. The amygdala, the locus of emotion and fear, is the quarter of the church of Santi Giovanni and Paolo. The hippocampus, the site of the long and short-term memory, is the entry into Venice via the Grand Canal. The cerebellum, which regulates balance, the lagoon bordered by the Lido, the hypothalamus, which controls circadian rhythms, the Piazza San Marco. That first summer I came to Venice, I was 19. I was with a boy I thought I might marry, and we sat on the steps of the Baroque Basilica of Santa Maria della Salute, which is a short walk from where I am writing now at the Pensione Accademia in the quieter environs of Dossodoro. We ate sandwiches made of pressed veal and drank cans of aranciata. It was too expensive to stay in Venice. We took the train from Padua, where we had gone to see the Giottos in the Scrovegni Chapel, and stayed in a gimcrack boarding house where the walls were paperboard painted to look like wood. The ceiling of the chapel was flecked with gold stars. Now in Padua, you walk into an air-conditioned air-controlled chamber and have 15 minutes to look at the frescoes. Then you stayed as long as you liked. We sat in the pews and read letters that Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote from Italy. It was hot, and I argued with the boy. I did not want to hear any more about Savonarola, about whom he had become obsessed. He had written a senior thesis in college on Jonathan Edwards, about whom I had previously listened. To annoy me because I would not listen, he was rude to an old friend of mine who had come up for the day from Florence, where she was studying, to meet us. It has been years since I spoke to either of them. Perhaps it is better for me to come to Venice alone. There is no one with whom I have been to Venice that I am now on speaking terms, as if one caprice of the city is to induce fever dreams from which there is no return. On June 4th, 1851, Mrs. Browning wrote to a Miss Mitford, I have been between heaven and earth since our arrival at Venice. The heaven of it is ineffable. Never had I touched the skirts of so ineffable a place. The beauty of the architecture, the silvered trails of water, nothing is like it, not a second Venice in the world. But now comes the earth side. Robert, after sharing the ecstasy, grows uncomfortable and nervous, unable to sleep or eat, and poor Wilson, still worse, in a miserable condition of sickness and headache. The next morning, I left the pensione to visit, or better, to find, Santa Maria de' Miracoli, hemmed in so tight in Cannareccio that it might be a white handkerchief in the district's pocket. The confectionery marble church, finished in 1490, was built to house Niccolo di Pietro's icon of the Madonna, which is said to have shed real tears. Perfectly restored by, I think, Save Venice, the church is a favorite of Venetian brides. Mermaids and angels are carved into the chancel. When I first saw it at 19, I thought, I will get married here. I have been married twice, neither time in Venice. It is perhaps not adequate to say that the marriages have not lasted, for after all, they have yielded children, monographs, candlesticks, cabinets, all of which are scattered here and there, lasting, like the little dog endlessly watching St. Augustine in Carpaccio's painting at the Scuola Scavione, which is open, if you're lucky, from 3 to 5, Monday to Thursday. In Venice, there are the usual places to go. San Marco, the Frari, where the Madonna soars convincingly up to heaven, the Rialto. These places do not usually include the Church of the Gesuiti on the Esplanade of the Fondamenta Nova. The way there is along the west flank of the hospital, near the Questura. I ask a young mother pushing a baby who holds a sticky ice cream for directions. The sun is so hot that I inch along looking for shade. Then there is the high arched bridge beyond the Vaporetto stands. And the church, solemn as an elephant. The first time I came here, I was sick, and the sacristan found me a place in the back where there was cool water, and I could put my face in my hands. Today, heat gleams on the steps. Inside, it is quiet. I am the only person here on earth. How can it be? The floor, which is made of black and white marble, a geometric pattern not quite classifiable, is uneven and undulates beneath the pews. The interior is entirely black and white, Jesuitical. When I look up, I am amazed to find that the curtains over the pulpit, which I had always thought were huge swags of black and white figured velvet, are in fact marble carved to look like velvet. On the way to the Campo, I find a shop where years ago I bought a gold bracelet that I later lost in New York at the movies. The proprietor, older, is seated in exactly the same place behind the glass counter filled with junk. Is there another bracelet? No. She shows me an extraordinarily ugly opal ring, which I consider buying. The last time I was there, on the steps by the shop, was a little girl just out of her pram, with whom I shared a cornetto, while her parents drank un'ombra across the campo, looking at me gratefully. I was married then, and my husband sat nearby at a little table drinking a coffee. In his pocket was a box containing gold earrings set with jade and pearls that he had found out walking that morning. It was the last trip we made together. In Venice, things are and are not what they seem. The strobe light of the imagination is on full time. It is daunting, the combination of beauty and legerdemain. On the way back to the pensione after an evening out, the water under the Ponte Accademia is black, then azure, the lights of the Vaporetto turning the waves' sunset colors until it disappears in the direction of Carazzonico, the palazzo where Robert Browning died. It was owned by his son Penn and his rich American daughter-in-law Fanny Coddington Barrett Browning, who Venice made nervous but who could not stay away. I carry souvenirs in my pocket, more places to find. Today, it is a restaurant, La Colonna, near the Gesuiti, where years ago, my husband and I ate spaghetti alla vongole and admired the drawings by the proprietor's children thumbtacked to the walls. A shop near the restaurant sold very old Murano glass, of the kind you cannot find in the arcades filled with junk near the Rialto and San Marco. But where is the shop? On the map, it is near something called the Calle del Fumo, but the Calle del Fumo does not continue to the Fondamente Nove. It issues from a cul-de-sac that seems to have no entry point. There is no phrase in Italian for as the crow flies. In Venice, it is easy to start in one place and end up completely lost, very close to where one started. My map is too big and detailed. I can find nothing on it. I sit on a tiny bridge, bewildered. You are here, a woman hurrying with a briefcase shows me, an emerald ring on her finger that points to a tiny, inconclusive tangle. When the children were little, we told them, if you are lost, stand still in one place and do not move. Louise at 8 in the butterfly house at the zoo stood stock still, a tiara of butterflies encircling her head, hands stretched out wide, bright butterfly wings opening and shutting on her arms and legs. Arms outstretched. The beggars in Venice are unlike beggars elsewhere, kneeling on the pavement for hours, marking a spot not moving. In a scrap of shade in Campo Santa Maria Formosa, a woman sits all day, a shawl over her head, immobile, saying nothing, a mute question mark lowing to a handful of coins. Each day on the way to Santa Maria della Salute, I pass a blind woman crouching. At the end of the overpass, a cellist plays My Way until it curls around this piazza like smoke. Yesterday, on the bridge on the Riva della Schiavone, near the Danieli, there was a beggar I had not seen before, a woman with what looked like fur covering half her face, an apparition. Legends say that the Venetians are half beast, half human, but it was the first time I had seen evidence of it. If the Venetians are Ovidian, I would imagine they are half fish. The palazzi along the Grand Canal resemble most closely the illustrations in a book of fairy tales I had when I was a child, the palaces of Neptune and his regiments, the mermen. The Biennale is going on. Banners disfigure the palazzi with slogans promoting exhibits that are meant to be evocative, notes handed to a pauper in a fairy tale. The dream whisper, this is not a pavilion. But like many things in Venice, they are absurd. It is the question of apotheosis. It is hopeless to show new art in Venice. Nothing can rival what is already there. But one reason to go to the Biennale is to visit palazzi that are often closed to the public. One is the Palazzo Zenobia, named for a woman who married Septimius Odenathus, the king of Palmyra. He died, and within 5 years, she had invaded and conquered Anatolia. Captured by Emperor Aurelian AD 274, Zenobia is said to have been exhibited in a cage in a victory procession in Rome. It is unclear whether she too licked the paint off the bars. This time a happy ending. On account of her military acumen and beauty, perhaps not in that order, Aurelian freed her and presented her with a villa in Tivoli. Her descendants include Saint Zenobius, a 5th century priest of Florence. The Palazzo Zenobio is behind the Campo Santa Margherita, beyond the Santa Maria del Carmelo, the church dedicated to the Carmelites and the mystery of the scapular. Today it is hot and the church looks cool and I go in. In New York it is raining. 2 marble staircases mount to the 2nd floor, where in one corner there is a painting representing harried Prudence who holds a mirror pointed to the sun. A serpent has coiled itself around her waist. I am struggling to read the Italian. This Prudence is of 2 minds. To be prudent, she must first admit temptation. Is that it? Beyond the Campo, the deserted Calle ends at the Palazzo in a lawn overgrown with weeds. A cooking fire has left char marks on the grass. One wing houses the Armenian pavilion, which shows a slow-running video in which a person playing Lenin appears. On an explanatory placard, the curator has written, "Loss of relevance of a future at one stage of life, leaving creative residue." The letters curl around my neck, a noose or Prudence's serpent biting its own tail. But the Palazzo's own stupendous hall of mirrors confounds, a gallery of reflections, each 20 feet tall, as if they held the gaze of all the people who have looked into the wavy glass here in Venice, hoping to find their own spirit level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cynthia. That was wonderful. My mind is on the Grand Canal and in some of the many beautiful places that you mentioned, including, as you said, Santa Maria Miracoli, which Save Venice did restore for 10 years, a long campaign from 1987
Thank you very much.
to 1997. I was curious when you mentioned that. Did you visit the church during that time and before and after? Do you recall seeing it in its?
I think there was a point when you couldn't visit it because of the restoration. So it was certainly before and after. I remember going and seeing that you couldn't go in because of the restore.
That's right. Well, I'm glad you've seen it in its before and after state. Yes. Thinking about all of the time you've spent on this book and your writing process. From reading it, I know you mentioned the lovely hotel where you stayed. And I wondered how much of the book did you write in the hotel or in Venice, or how much is from your recollections and your memories? So what is your process?
The Venice book came about. I really wrote most of it in that week in Venice, in the hotel night after each day. And then of course I rewrote it, adding things that I remembered, or looking up to make sure my facts were right, or that it was the right saint, or the right street, and poring over maps and so on. But I did write most of that at a stretch, and then reworked it over time. So
that is probably part of why it feels so present. Your writing, you really are right there. We are there with you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing this with us. So my question also, 2 questions right now. When this moment we're in, the pandemic, is behind us, or when it is safe to travel, or when we are able to travel, where would you like to go first? Will this be Venice or Rome? And what church or painting or place do you most sort of long for during this time?
I would love to go to Venice. And in fact, I'm constantly looking at the travel advisories and trying to figure out, and, it's such a terrible time. One of my closest friends in Rome right now has COVID. Everybody's quite isolated, and, they went through that tremendous lockdown. I think I would probably go to Rome and then hope I could go to Venice. I'm trying to think what I would go and look at first. I always go, I usually or often stay at the American Academy in Rome. And So Trastevere is a place I'm familiar with, and I usually go immediately to Santa Maria di Trastevere in Rome and look at the, it's kind of a mini San Marco because of the Byzantine mosaics, which I quite love. So that's probably the first place I would go, but now I'm sure I would think of many others. You know, I think one's impulse in Venice is always just to walk to San Marco.
Yes.
Especially in the winter, which is the best time to be in Venice. So it'd be lovely to be there now.
You said you were 19 on your first trip to Venice, and that water taxis are the best way to arrive for
Well,
that.
I didn't know that then. I didn't know that then. I didn't know that. The funny story about that was, I don't remember if I cut it, if it's in the book or not, but I do remember sitting on those steps, eating those sandwiches and not staying in Venice. You know, we had backpacks and all that. And I have very few prescient moments in my life, but one of them was sitting on the steps and thinking to myself, I will not come here again like this. And that did turn out to be true.
How many visits have you made since then, would you say?
I don't know, 10 or 12 probably.
And do you stay for an extended period of time when you are?
I tried to stay for at least a week.
Mm-hmm.
I tried to, my last visit a couple of years ago was with one of my daughters when she was still in high school and she hadn't been, and we stayed. We were going to stay just for a few days and go off, see something else. And the minute we got there, she said, "Can we just stay here all week?" And we did. So she was a convert right away, which was just lovely.
I understand that impulse and her choice. Another question I had on the back of the book, which I'll show everyone, beautiful edition, a key quote here. It says, "I had come to Venice because I was preparing to break my own heart and I needed another version of love." So could you tell us more about that? Maybe why Venice? Why, what version of love was that going to be? Why not Paris or Bruges or Amsterdam?
Well, I mean, things if you read the book, which of course I hope you will all read the book, the book is also about, as books about Italy often are, about a complicated love affair. And I thought that I would go away and I would find some, that Italy would be returned to me in a way that Italy had been such a first love, and that I would be content with that. And it turned out to be somewhat true, but also, of course, not true, like most things.
I understand that as well. Thank you for explaining that a little further. That was one of my questions, and I share your affinity and passion for both cities. Rome was, in a way, my first love, and now it's Venice. It's absolutely taken over. And one of the things I really enjoyed with reading your book was seeing how basically practically every church you mentioned, Save Venice, has worked in. So I think that just speaks to
my favorites, then. That's great.
In the city. Oh yes, we're the Miracoli, the Frari, the Gesuiti.
Nobody goes to the Gesuiti. I don't understand it. It's so extraordinary.
That's true. It is not always on everyone's path. Madonna dell'Orto also.
Right.
Everywhere. So in some ways, I think for all of our viewers and all of our members, this is just going to be a really special and fun read when they have their own copies of the books. Another thought, that time when you did arrive at 19, what was your impression then versus how you feel now about the city and how it's changed? Has it changed? And you talked about the Biennale, and in some ways that sort of the connotations that aren't so positive about the Biennale, where's the place of contemporary art in this city of the finest Renaissance art, but that it's a chance to glimpse these plazas that you couldn't otherwise maybe get into. So has your experience of the city shifted very much from that first visit to now?
I think, I do have, and I talk about it a little bit in the book. I mean, there are people who will say, oh, Venice, it's just too much. It's too much for me, or I don't get it really, or, usually they've come, in July or something for 2 days or when, but, I've immediately felt completely at home in Venice. that it appealed to some part of my imagination, and met my imagination of what a place should be like. So I always felt completely at home. And I think that Venice has changed. Of course, there's just a lot more tourist kind of stuff, and if only we could get those big liners out of those cruise ships out. I mean, that just seems to be imperative. That would make a big difference. But I still think that if you go, in the off season, which is the most beautiful time, it's really not changed. And the minute you walk away from San Marco or the Rialto, or, in Canaraggio, it's quiet. There's nobody there.
Right.
It's as it was.
I understand that quiet is sort of coming back, as our colleagues in Venice are saying. The city seems to be in this moment right now preparing for a potential resurgence and more restrictions, and that sense of quiet is certainly.
It's a time to go, but we can't go.
Right.
No one wants us.
No, it's true. Another thought from your book that I wanted to ask you about, and I know our listeners haven't read this yet, but you refer to Venice with references to weightlessness and sort of being untethered to the earth. And I thought this was very beautiful. You say, on the earth side, when you reference communication from home, and that you bought a new phone to, and I quote you, in order not to vanish from the earth when the plane touched down at Marco Polo. So what gives you this sense of a feeling that you might vanish, or one might vanish?
There's that sense that you could just turn into foam somehow. It's so enticing. And it just doesn't, the idea that, here I'm in Massachusetts, and I think you're in New York, and, that as we're sitting here, the Vaporettos are going up and down the Grand Canal. How can that be? How can that be in the same universe? It seems quite removed. And, we've all been to other kinds of places that don't look anything like New York and Massachusetts, but they don't, to me, have this absolute otherworldly quality, London can be magical, all kinds of places can be magical, but it has its own enchantment. So you feel like you're falling under a spell. At least I do.
Yes, Venice certainly has its own enchantment, and as does Rome. And because so many of our members also love Rome the way that I think we both do, I wondered if you might give us a taste of the Rome section of the book with just a brief reading.
Sure.
Wonderful.
A little section about the market, which is very compact. I could read that.
Terrific. Thank you. I'll close my camera.
This market is it's not in it's not Campo di Fiore, as I say in the piece. It's in Monteverde, which is up above Trastevere, and is really not visited by tourists. And but I had heard about this market and was staying near there and wanted to see it. So this is just a little bit about that. Like so many places in Rome, the market at San Giovanni del Dio in Monteverde on the map looks closer than it turns out to be. I walk along the eastern flank of the Doria Pamphili. The long black walls along the Via di San Pancrazio hide the park from view. In a city where life is lived in the open, the treasures, here the vast park studded with statuary and orange trees, the old villa like a drawing in a dream, pink and white and gold, so outmoded as to be outlandish, are behind walls. A Roman rectitude contained and marked by gates, grills, dead ends. I find the market by retracing the steps of women I see coming across the piazza, laden down by bulging net shopping bags. It is vast, a labyrinth, hidden down a lane behind a bus stop. The outer aisles provide everyday necessities, pots and pans and 1,000 coffee makers with bright red handles, strainers and wooden spoons, each one with a different shaped bowl and perforations, racks of cheap cotton dresses, printed with zebra stripes or tiny elephants, as if the buyer were poised to go on safari. Next to them are plant and flower vendors crammed with geraniums and small bay trees, dwarf orange shrubs with tiny oranges like Japanese lanterns, and the strange pale violet and verdigris hyacinths which I first saw in a London garden last week, their separate petals like a baby's splayed fingers, as if to say, here, there's nothing that is not in Rome, no matter what you think, you only have to look. It is the season for zucchini flowers and melons, strawberries and fennel bulbs smaller than a child's fist. A fish stall displays a sheet of glistening sardines, rows of red crawfish and orange mullet, a pile of violet clams. At the center of the market, baskets and barrels of olives and almonds, salted, brined, roasted, toasted with rosemary or thyme, slivers of lemon peel floating in oils, figs with moist secret recesses, dried apricots, sultanas. I buy pecorino, some roasted walnuts, then leave, but return to buy an orange melon. Unlike the market at the Campo de Fiore in the center, where the vendors sell their wares by calling out to tourists to cajole them to buy an overpriced bag of dried porcini or pasta in the colors of the Italian flag. Here the market is silent, but for an almost soundless patter of boop, 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 more, the fruit man asks, more plums or more strawberries, just new today? But I know they will last not more than a day in my room warm under the roof. As nothing lasts, or does it? There comes a point when one realizes that almost everything in Rome has been recycled, reused, remodeled. A few hours later, having deposited my shopping bag under the eaves and walked down into Trastevere, I cross the river and find myself at Largo di Torre Argentina, leaning over the parapet for the 100th time to catch the sight of the street cats sunning themselves on the stones of the 4 Roman temples that once stood here, named A, B, C, and D, like scattered building blocks. I scan the records for some sign of the place in the theater of Pompeii where Caesar fell. The theater, which could hold almost 20,000 people, is gone. It was still listed in a pilgrim guidebook written in the 9th century, but had all but disappeared by the late Middle Ages. Its travertine marble facing was recycled for the facade of the Palazzo della Cancelleria, the red granite columns for the Basilica di San Lorenzo. But in the street between Largo Argentina and the Campo de Fiore, you can trace what may be a curve of the old arena along the arm of the Via dei Caravaggio. And after enough visits, one sees oneself coming and going, drawn and redrawn on a tablet with an infinite memory. There's your market.
I can smell and taste all of those.
A little summer for us.
Is even some of our questions actually are rolling in, and I think I might begin. One of the questions is, it can be applied to both Rome and Venice, which is, do you have a favorite season for Venice? But I'll also ask if you have a favorite season for Rome.
My favorite season for Venice, as I said, is the winter. I think it's the most romantic and the most beautiful, and it's empty, and you can go anywhere, and there are no lines, and you can eat wherever you want. Everybody's happy to see you, and nobody's grouchy. So that's, I think, my favorite season. And in Rome, I would say May or October. The Christmas in Rome is really wonderful.
And I know you mentioned you had been to Venice 10 or 12 times. Is that a similar number for Rome, or have you
Probably, yeah. I mean, it's just extraordinary when we think of our lives now. Last year, I think 2 years ago, I went to Rome 3 times. You know, it's just, we can't, you know, who were those people?
Right. We'll get back there. Another question, which is, there are 2 related questions from 2 different people, so I will ask them both. But the question is, if you could speak more to the writers or works that have informed your writings on an experience of Venice. And then the part 2 from someone else, this is similar though, is who are the Italian writers, if any, who influenced this recent book? So there's the question, generally, the writers or works informing your writing or experience, and then specifically Italian Italian writers?
I think Mary McCarthy on Venice, and Joseph Brodsky, who I write about at length in the book, who was a close friend of mine, and that was a big influence of my love of Venice. And I also, of course, love, as we all do, Donna Leon. I would say those. And then in Rome, the Rome book really kind of talks back and forth with A Time in Rome by Elizabeth Bowen, which was written in the 50s, which was, my piece is a little bit in conversation with that book. And then, it's hard to imagine so many books about Rome. As far as Italian writers, a huge influence on my work has been Natalia Ginsburg, and to some and Montale. I would say those are my the two greatest influences on my work about Italy, and even in my own work in English.
Thank you. You mentioned Elizabeth Bowen, and one of the things you write is that she says that she thinks Rome is masculine and Venice is feminine. Do you agree with that? Do you disagree?
She says that. Yes, but I think, that there are things about Venice which are quite masculine, and things about Rome which are, if not feminine, let's say a celebration of the feminine.
That's a nice way to put it. Another question that has come in, which is someone who is reading your book, and thanks you for the presentation. She says she's curious about your observation on the similarity between the shape of the central cortex of the brain and Venice, and how you came to make that connection.
Simply by looking in the book. I mean, it just struck me. I can't remember whether I was looking at a map of Venice and thought of that, or whether I was looking at a map of the brain for something.
Which one
it looked like, I can't remember now which it was, but it seemed so true. And I'm very interested in how the body maps our understanding of different places. And in Rome, I talk about that quite a bit, but not so much the brain, but the body.
It's fascinating. I hadn't thought about it, but then once I read that, I thought, I can see exactly what Cynthia means. Another question, which is, have you been to the Scuola Grande di San Rocco? I imagine the answer is yes. But if so, what were your impressions of it? And are you familiar with the works of Tintoretto? I know you speak to Tintoretto in the book in different sections.
Yes. Yes. And, when I'm thinking of Tintoretto and it always was so striking to me that he was buried in such an out-of-the-way place in Venice, almost as a kind of afterthought. I think in Tintoretto we see all the colors of Venice, especially in the clouds. It's almost as though Tintoretto's paintings are reflections in the water. That's what they look like to me always. So. It's hard to parse out at this distance. It's a little hard to parse out an exact feeling at an exact time in an exact place. When I was rereading this, trying to put something together for you, I was sort of struck by the force of my own recollections, that they seem rather sharp. Maybe some of these things are best left, a little less clear.
Well, there is a benefit in either direction, I think.
Probably, yes.
Save Venice had a major celebration for Tintoretto's 500th birthday in 2018. So we restored many, many Tintoretto works. And the Scuola Grande di San Rocco is a place that is very dear to our chairman's heart, I can say. In terms of those memories, in the beginning of this pandemic, I confess that in moments of panic, I would close my eyes and just imagine walking in different cala in Venice.
Oh, really? That's so nice. What a nice thing to do.
Yeah.
I picture myself walking on the Via Garibaldi in Rome.
all things that we can do. Let's hope sooner rather than later. Well, we are almost coming up to our time. So I wonder if there are any last questions coming in. And if there are not, I just have to say it's been such a pleasure to speak with you, Cynthia, and to have you here tonight and help bring, I think, a little bit of Venice and Rome to our whole community, which is what we aim to do with our Education and Enrichment series, and what we aim to do with our webinars and other snippets where our experts will speak about their favorite restorations. So for anyone who now needs to run right out and order your book, we have the information in the chat feature for where you can purchase the book. I hope you will. And for anyone who has not yet watched Save Venice's recently premiered short film, A Love Letter to Venice, it's another way to feel connected to the city where we wish we could be. And you can find that on savevenice.org or on our social media and YouTube channels. But Cynthia, again, this was just a real pleasure to have you. And some thank yous are rolling in now already from the audience through the.
Well, and again, thank all, I really thank all of you for your efforts on the behalf of Venice. It is so appreciated by everyone near and far.
Well, that's so kind of you to say. And when you started your presentation, I thought, what a lovely way to begin by talking about saving Venice is saving beauty. That was what you said. And I think that's
true.
Some of how we all feel. So thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And buonasera.
Okay, buonasera. Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.
Grazie.
Grazie.